Scripture this morning will begin with John 6, 1 through 13, as Jesus feeds the 5,000. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he had already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than a half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. Next reading is taken from Luke 5:27-32, as Jesus calls Levi and eats with the sinners. After this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting at his tax booth. "Follow me," Jesus said to him. And Levi got up and left everything and followed him. Then Levi had a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect complained to his disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus answered them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." Thus end the readings.
Thank you, Dennis. So these two scriptures are not really parallel. They're totally different stories, but they make the point about reaching out to others in different ways, but in connections too. They point out to us that it is important to share. They point out to us that it's important to care for one another. They point out to us it's important to feed people that need feeding. They point out to us that it's important not to look at someone's appearance or what you think they do or don't do and decide whether or not to hang out with them and be their friend. And another thing they point out is that Jesus gets a lot of mileage out of surprising people. He takes this block party on this side of the hill and creates enough food for everybody, in fact more than enough, just by getting someone to share. And no one's more surprised, as is often the case when this happens, than the disciples. They always seem stunned when Jesus does something miraculous. He also surprises people by not being particularly discriminatory about who he hangs out with. He doesn't seem to put labels on anyone the way everyone else seems to, and the scripture shows us just how long people who say they follow Jesus have been in the labeling business. We've been in that business a very long time now. But Jesus is not in that business. He just eases himself right into an unknown neighbor's house. He seemingly just strikes up this conversation with Levi, the tax collector, on the side of the road. And evidently, according to the scripture or the way it's listed, Levi has some questionable friends as well. But Jesus makes himself at home in that setting, much to the chagrin of the religious leaders who are always questioning his motives. What can we learn from these stories? We learn that caring for your neighbors means doing whatever it takes to feed them when they're hungry. We learn that Jesus doesn't discriminate. He considers every single person his neighbor and is willing to spend time with them on their turf. And he doesn't really care what the religious establishment thinks of that. In light of our recent unrest, which is all too common these days, more black and armed men shot by police, more fears driving the violence, more bombs exploding or being discovered in places like New York City, it might be a good time to actually heed the actions of Jesus in these stories and other stories when he chooses to love instead of hate, when he chooses love instead of derision, when he chooses to offer generous hospitality instead of having neighbors fend for themselves. I mean, these incidents just happened in the news. They happen almost any given week now. I could preach this sermon again in a few weeks and it would probably be the same, sadly. It's become a normalized part of our society. Something bad happens, we all feel bad, and then life moves on. Life moves on, at least for us. It mostly moves on for us here in a predominantly white, affluent area because we don't have to think about it or deal with it. And so we don't. We ignore it or we just let somebody else deal with it. But that's exactly what Jesus does not do in these stories, in any of his stories actually. But in either of these stories, he doesn't do it at all. In the dinner party story, he just strikes up this conversation with Levi as he's collecting taxes. And Levi starts walking with him and evidently really enjoys his company. And he hosts a dinner party for Jesus. And he invites his other friends. And these are people that the religious leaders do not like for one reason or another. Neither of these men, Jesus or Levi, actually, let perceived differences in culture or lifestyle or whatever get in their way. They just become friends. If this were put in today's context, it would be a community changer, as this Art of Neighboring book talks about. A life changer, even. Imagine if we replaced the suspicious nature that we tend to have for people who are different from us with a handshake and a sign of respect. Imagine a world where that was normal instead of the world we have. Jesus says that it is just as easy as talking to someone who isn't like you. Really talking to them and listening to them and being their companion. It's the Art of Neighboring 101 according to Jesus. Displayed here actually by both Jesus and Levi. We also learn in these scriptures that it doesn't take much at all, actually, to make a miracle happen. In the loaves and fishes story, a small child has a meal and asks Jesus to make it feed 5,000. How can we do that? Translated into the Art of Neighboring principles, you may only need to give a 1 or 2 minutes of your time to make a miraculous impact on someone's day. When we offer what we have, it often multiplies in ways we didn't expect. Another thing we learn from this particular story is that children are often on the front lines of our miracle-making possibilities. Once when I was assisting the pastor in teaching confirmation class, like over 20 years ago, at a church in South Carolina, we had a young girl of 11 who wanted to bring her best friend, whose family was non-practicing Catholic, to communion, to confirmation classes. Now, the pastor and I could have said, well, it's Methodist confirmation. Probably it's for Methodists, and she wouldn't find much interest in it. But we talked about it, and we told her to bring her friend. And guess what? The little girl decided to join the church and become a Methodist, and thankfully her parents allowed her to do that. This was over 20 years ago, but for all I know, she's still a devout Methodist somewhere in South Carolina or somewhere else on the planet. A small gesture, a changed life, Catholic parents willing to give the Methodist church a chance with their daughter. a pastor willing to allow whoever wanted to be part of the confirmation class to be there. It really didn't take much for that to happen. An invitation, a question, an affirmative answer, a life that went in a different direction. What kinds of little neighboring steps could we take as a congregation, or are we taking? What kinds of neighboring steps can you take as individuals? Can I take? What kinds of neighboring steps can we take as Christians in a world that seems less interested in what we have to offer than ever? There's a lot of examples out there. You can read in books or on blogs, or if you do a Google search of the art of neighboring or neighboring, there's a lot of video testimonies of people that share their stories about lives changed. I'll show one in just a second. Erica, you might want to turn it on and get it ready. They all point to one thing. It takes vulnerability and courage to reach out to people you don't know. Honestly, even if they do look like you, it takes vulnerability and courage. Even if they are like you. Imagine if they're not. It takes time and effort, but they all share of their lives, one for another, in all these encounters that I've read. And they all started with just one simple, tiny step of some kind that sometimes seemed odd and strange. Just like Jesus with the distrusted tax collector Levi that he decided to become friends with. And Levi decided to become friends with him. It would have been really easy for him to turn away a religious person. And just like Jesus with his hungry neighbors on the hillside, he reached out, he made connections. He sent his disciples out to make connections that they didn't understand. They found others, they found food, blessed it, miracles happened. So this video I'm going to show to end this series is about a turquoise table. And a woman who surprisingly found herself called into the mission field in her own neighborhood. A woman who found herself offering a mission through this picnic table. We'll think about our own picnic table. You know what? Is it ready, Erica? We can watch it.
I always thought I'd go far away on mission. I really did. I really thought my calling would be international, and I never in a million years thought that the Lord would ask me to walk outside of my door in the mission.
Oops. Try again later does not sound good. You want to work on it and I'll go ahead, Erica. You let me know if you got it fixed, okay? Where's my mic? There we go. The things that it takes us to be in mission are small, and sometimes they're large. They require almost no effort, and sometimes great sacrifice. But they all are part of what we're called to be and do in mission in this world, in mission around the world, in mission mostly just outside our parking lot. If we can just fall into line with what Jesus says and does in every place. Jesus is always inclusive. Jesus never leaves people out. Jesus doesn't seem to care what people have or don't have, what people are wearing or what people don't have to wear. He simply becomes a neighbor and a friend, a trusted ally and a companion. He becomes someone loved and appreciated, but not always. Many times Jesus was rejected and scorned and pushed away, and finally, Jesus was hanging on a cross. Jesus dies on the cross because of his inclusive love statement to the world. No one is left out, no one is left behind. Everyone is invited to God's kingdom. That didn't sit well with the world then, and in some ways ways it doesn't sit well with the world now. How's it going, Erica? 1 minute? 2 minutes? It's loading, that's good. In this story, the girl says at the beginning of the video that she thinks she'll be in international mission. That was always what she assumed. And she's very surprised when she finds out she's supposed to just be in her backyard, or not her backyard, actually her front yard in mission. Fingers crossed.
I always thought I'd go far away on mission. I really did. I really thought my calling would be international, and I never in a million years thought that the Lord would ask me to walk outside of my door in the mission field where I live and get to know my neighbors. I'm Kristen Shell, and I live in Austin, Texas. I am a wife and a mother of 4 children. Any given day, I am in the kitchen or in the minivan. I am active in the kids' school. I'm a writer, and I volunteer at church. We've been in this neighborhood almost 10 years. I always knew we were supposed to love our neighbors because it's the great commandment. But how you live that out day to day is hard, especially when you don't know your neighbors, which is the situation I was in. I did not know my neighbors. Sure, I knew, a handful of them. And so there was this huge questioning, what do you want me to do, Lord? Here I am, Lord. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to walk across the street and bang on doors? Do you want me to take cookies? What do you want me to do, Lord? God answers prayers in really winsome ways. I was hosting a party with a friend in our backyard, and I didn't have any tables. And so I ordered a picnic table from Lowe's. And when it arrived 2 days later, I knew that for the purposes of the party, I was going to have it in my backyard. But as soon as that party was over, I was moving that table in the front yard, and it was going to be a gathering place. And so I painted it turquoise, which is my favorite color. And I did. I put it outside, underneath the tree, in the front yard. It was awkward at first. I have this table, it's bright turquoise, it's sitting in the front yard, and now I'm like, well, now what do I do? So I took a whole bunch of stuff out with me. I took my phone and my journal and my computer, and I had some art stuff that I was working on because, I needed to look like I was just doing something. But going out front, I was saying to God, here I am, Lord, your will be done. Go before, behind, and beside me into the neighborhood. And that very day, life changed. And I met a neighbor within 3 hours of putting a table out in my front yard. A lot has happened since putting the table out there. There are a handful of women who are now very close friends who I did not know. It has become kind of a gathering place.
Hi, Bob. This is my daughter, Peggy.
One of the best things is just the sense of normal community, everyday life. When the neighborhood kids come over, they'll do homework when the weather's pretty. We've had lemonade stands, hot cocoa stands. More intimately, it's a place where I can meet and have met neighbors who now pop by with coffee and just for 15 minutes, a conversation over coffee that wouldn't have happened. The Lord has taught me, and I am learning to be present. That it sounds like it should be a no-brainer, but listening is not a skill that came naturally at first for me, nor was being present. It's great to see you there. Loving my neighbors has taught me how to love God better. It's drawn me into deeper relationship with Him. You don't need permission or a program to go outside and be who Christ has called you to be. When we open up our front door, and we take 3 steps right out our front yard, good things happen. Open up your door and let God do the rest.
Thank you, Erica. Kristen found herself offering God's love through her picnic table. And somehow, just like the loaves and fishes story, she knew immediately when she got the table that that's what she was supposed to do. It's wonderful what a little miraculous inspiration and a desire to reach out to your neighborhood can do to change lives. Our own lives and others around us. So, where should we put our turquoise table? Amen.